After being reborn, I gave up on Luis. No longer would I foolishly believe he had some hidden reason for ditching me on our engagement day. No longer would I drag a suitcase through the freezing winter to find him in the north, my fingers and toes covered in frostbite. No longer would I cry myself into oblivion upon hearing that he had married another woman, only to freeze to death in the bitter cold. This time, I tossed the engagement ring straight into the trash. I was the first to inform both families. The engagement is off. I'm going abroad. When Luis jumped into the icy lake in late autumn, desperately retrieving the ring and asking me, with all his pride stripped away, I looked at his pale, frozen face and stabbed a dagger straight into his heart. Nothing much. I just don't love you anymore. Chapter 1. I stood at the edge of the lake, clutching the engagement ring. Under the sunlight, the diamond sparkled like a star in the night sky. Absolutely stunning. In 1986, a ring like this wasn't just beautiful, it was worth a small fortune. I curled my lips into a bitter smile, then without hesitation, raised my hand and flung it far. Plunk! The ring sank to the bottom of the lake, its sparkle instantly swallowed by the water. I turned away without looking back. Luis, the ring you gave me, I don't want it anymore. I had been reborn. Reborn on the day before our engagement. Luis had carefully chosen that ring. He couldn't even wait for the engagement ceremony. He slipped it onto my finger early. He had said, "Diana, I can't wait another day. I wish I could marry you right now." At the time, I cried tears of joy, foolishly thinking I would spend my whole life nestled in Luis's heart. But the next day, in front of all our relatives and friends, he stood me up. He vanished, gone without a trace, like he evaporated from the world. No one knew where he went. I went nearly mad. I left all the guests behind and searched the entire military housing complex. In the end, all I found was a letter on his desk. Diana, as the engagement approaches, I realized I never truly loved you. Don't look for me. We're done. I stared at those 2 lines, my heart tearing open, barely able to breathe. It was his handwriting. I knew it. I don't remember how I managed to walk out of that building. Just that a huge crowd was waiting outside, surrounding me. They demanded answers. Where's Luis? What did he say? Come on. Keep looking. He must have been held up by the army. Not a single person thought Luis had abandoned me, because everyone in the compound knew Luis loved me like his life depended on it. He had been talking about marrying me for years. Since childhood, Luis and I had been inseparable. Both families had long treated it as a given that we would marry. They often joked and called each other in-laws already. The neighbors always said I was a lucky girl. Diana, marrying Luis is a blessing. You won't even need to leave the compound. You two grew up together, and Luis adores you. They said it so often, I started to believe it. Every time, I'd blush and shyly avoid responding, but Luis would laugh openly and grab my hand. That's right. I'm absolutely going to marry Diana. I will marry Diana. He said it like an oath, his eyes shining with certainty. Back then, I naively believed his love was real. But in the end, I realized I was nothing more than a joke. Now that I'm reborn, this time, I'm living for myself. Luis, please disappear from my world. Chapter 2. After tossing the ring, I went home and saw my parents, whom I hadn't seen in what felt like forever, thinking of how much they worried for me in my past life. How their hair turned white over my marriage. My nose stung with guilt. I threw myself into their arms, clinging tightly to them as tears soaked their shoulders. Seeing me cry, Mom immediately panicked. Diana, what's wrong? Did you fight with Luis? Don't cry, sweetheart. Whatever it is, just tell Mom, as she wiped away my tears. Her own eyes turned red. Dad was calmer than Mom. He took a drag from his cigarette. Voice heavy. Luis is a good kid. If there's something wrong, talk to him calmly. Don't bottle it up and act on impulse. Swallowing the guilt in my heart, I wiped my face. This time, my eyes were filled with determination. Dad, Mom, I want to call off the engagement with Luis. I'm not going through with the ceremony tomorrow. My tone was so firm it startled them. For a moment, their faces turned pale. They clearly wanted to talk me out of it, but ultimately, they said nothing. Diana, are you really sure? Mom gently tucked a strand of hair behind my ear. Eyes full of worry. I nodded solemnly. I'm sure. Dad frowned deeply and let out a heavy sigh. Marriage is no small matter. Once you've made this choice, you can't easily turn back. I pressed my lips together and clenched my fists. I won't change my mind. Why would I? In my past life, because I loved Luis, I convinced myself he hadn't abandoned me by choice, that he must have had his reasons. I begged both families to pull every string they had to search for him. Eventually, I heard he was in the northern province. Ignoring my family's protests, I packed my things and traveled across mountains and snow to reach that desolate, frozen place. In the heart of winter, I developed frostbite so severe it turned to infection. My hands and feet were so damaged, I needed a cane to walk. After enduring all that, I finally found Luis, in a fancy cafe, and he wasn't alone. A woman stood beside him, wrapped in a luxurious wool coat, clinging to his arm. She looked down at me with haughty disdain. I was wearing thin, tattered clothes, disheveled, frail, like a beggar off the street. I grabbed Luis and demanded why he left me. He shook me off coldly, his eyes like ice. Who are you? Sorry, I don't know you. Then he turned his back on me and walked away with that woman. I chased after them, shouting, asking who she was. Luis gave a slight smile and looked at her with adoration. This is my wife. Please stop following me. We're going home. I watched their figures disappear together, and the dam inside me broke. Tears poured down as my heart shattered into pieces that could never be mended. I had spent my last cent. I curled up in a broken-down, drafty warehouse, trembling, my tears freezing into ice as they slid down my cheeks, and as I cried, I slipped away. I never woke up from that icy winter night. Looking back now, I was so heartbreakingly naive, but this time, heaven gave me a second chance, and I'll treasure it. I will never waste my youth again for Luis. This time, I will draw the line, for good. Chapter 3. When Luis's family found out I was breaking off the engagement, it was chaos. Luis rushed over to my house, eyes red, fingers digging into my shoulders, knuckles pale and trembling. Diana, are you really leaving me? Tears slid down his sharply defined cheeks, like something out of a painting, but I remained expressionless. That's right. I don't want you anymore. In this life, I only want to live well, far away from Luis. Hearing my unwavering tone, his lips trembled faintly. I don't believe it, he murmured. Diana, you accepted my ring. He reached for my left hand, the one where I'd worn the ring. But the moment his fingers brushed my skin, his expression froze. He felt nothing, panicked. He grabbed my hand and held it up. Sure enough, the finger was bare. His gaze instantly turned bloodshot. Diana, where's the ring? His voice shook violently, like someone had just crushed his heart. My eyes stung, but I buried the last trace of emotion I had for him. I threw it away. I said it coldly. My voice was like ice. Where? In the lake. The very next second, Luis let go of me and bolted out the door. An hour later, he returned, soaking wet from head to toe, water dripping from his pants. His hair clung to his forehead in thick strands. It was late autumn, the lake water was freezing. His lips had turned purple, his face ghostly pale. Diana. I found the ring. He dropped to one knee, shivering. Let me propose again. Say yes, please? Looking at his disheveled, pitiful state, I couldn't help but let out a cold laugh. Luis, who are you putting on this act for? I turned and walked away, leaving him trembling in the cold wind, but he grabbed me again. Diana, why so sudden? I didn't even look back, just shrugged, pretending not to care. Nothing special. I just don't love you anymore. Our fate's run its course. Luis, this time, let me be the one to say it. Chapter 4. Ever since the engagement was called off, Luis never came to bother me again, and I didn't waste a single thought on him either. My full attention was on preparing to study abroad, in my past life, just to stay by Luis's side. I gave up the opportunity my advisor had fought hard to get me, a fully funded government-sponsored program overseas. I insisted on staying, just to get engaged to him. But this time, I've figured it out. You have to live for yourself. When my advisor heard I'd suddenly changed my mind, he was visibly surprised. "Aren't you afraid Luis will feel abandoned, left behind all alone here?" It wasn't just the military housing compound. Even my university knew about Luis and me. My advisor genuinely wanted me to pursue further studies abroad. But at the same time, he hesitated to break up a couple everyone thought was perfect. I curved my lips into a faint, emotionless smile. "Whether or not he feels lonely is no longer my concern." He froze slightly at the chill in my voice. "Did you two have a fight?" he asked cautiously, testing the waters. I shook my head. "I'm not going through with the marriage. From now on, he's him, I'm me." As I said that, I felt a deep heaviness in my chest, as if I'd forcefully ripped out a seed that had been growing inside me for years. My advisor sighed gently. "Diana, think carefully. Once you're overseas, if you ever want to see Luis again, it won't be." Before he could finish, I interrupted him. "Don't worry, sir. I won't regret it." Seeing my determination, he finally handed over the application documents for the program. The moment I walked out of his office holding those papers, my eyes burned slightly. I wasn't sure if it was from excitement at stepping into a new chapter, or a quiet sorrow for the feelings I'd let go. Either way, emotions swirled in my chest. As I stepped out of the academic building, I was flipping through the documents, when suddenly, I bumped into someone head-on. "Oh, I'm sorry." Just as I looked up to apologize, my gaze met a pair of weary, weathered eyes. Luis. He looked like he hadn't slept all night. Dark circles under his eyes, his gaze deep and unreadable. Our sudden reunion made the air feel as if it had frozen. His pale lips trembled slightly. After a long pause, he finally forced out a sentence. "Diana, I heard you're going abroad?" Chapter 5. I was genuinely amazed at how quickly Luis got the news. Aside from my parents, I hadn't told a single soul about my plans to go abroad. My eyes darkened slightly. I avoided his gaze and brushed past him without a word. He grabbed my wrist. Hard. His voice trembled with pain. "Diana, you won't even say one word to me?" That pitiful, low tone made my heart clench for a split second. But that cheap, worthless pain, I crushed it down. "Diana, learn your lesson this time." "No, I won't." I kept a cold face and deliberately spoke in harsh, crude tones. "Where I go has nothing to do with your damn life." The moment the words fell, I saw his clenched fists trembling, and the next second, he yanked me back and pinned me hard against the cold concrete wall of the academic building. "Diana, if you leave, we might never see each other again. Do you even realize that?" He roared. His voice was hoarse, like his throat was about to burst. I froze. From childhood to now, I had never seen Luis lose control like this. He had always been calm, soft-spoken, never the type to yell or lash out. What was wrong with him? Had he finally lost it because I was the one who left him this time? Yeah, that had to be it. He couldn't take the rejection. Once I calmed down, I sneered coldly. "That's for the best. I've been sick of your face for ages anyway. Now move." I shoved him with all my strength, but when my fingertips brushed against his shoulder, that light, bony feeling made my heart stutter. He's lost so much weight. Not long ago, his shoulders had been strong and broad. I used to lean against them, laughing and teasing him until he'd get flustered and toss me over his shoulder, spinning me around again and again. When I finally got dizzy and cried out for mercy, he'd smirk and gently put me down. That was Luis's version of punishment. It always ended in him fussing over me, massaging my temples, making me warm sweet drinks to settle me down. As the memories came flooding back, my eyes grew damp. I dug my nails hard into my palm, the pain dragging me back to reality. I brushed against his shoulder one last time and walked away, without looking back. In that brief moment we passed, I caught a glimpse of his face from the corner of my eye. He forced a bitter smile, then muttered softly, "Good. Maybe it's better this way. At least you won't hear about my death when I'm gone." I frowned. What the hell was that supposed to mean? Chapter 6. I thought that from now on, Luis and I would never meet again. But as I stepped into the car heading to the airport, feeling the warmth and reluctance in my parents' eyes, I caught sight of Luis. He was standing at the very edge of the crowd, far away from the others seeing me off. He looked even thinner. His narrow shoulders inside that crisp military uniform made him look like a child trying to wear a grown man's clothes. His dull eyes finally flickered with the faintest light the moment our gazes met. His lips moved slightly, as if trying to say something, but in the end, he said nothing at all. Only his clenched fists betrayed his struggle, the knuckles faintly pale from tension. I quickly looked away, afraid even one more glance might give him false hope. Diana, take care of yourself when you're abroad. Call your mom when you have time. Outside the car window, Mom held my hand tightly. The warmth of her palm and the tears glistening in her eyes made me forget Luis, if only for a moment. I blinked back the sting in my nose and nodded again and again. The car finally started, pulling away amid all the farewells. But I could feel it, a scorching gaze, piercing through the layers of people, locked onto me. It was as if he wanted to drag me back with just his eyes. But he couldn't. I deliberately avoided looking at Luis. Still, out of the corner of my eye, I caught the moment he flinched, right as the car started to move. As the vehicle pulled farther and farther away, I finally dared to look back through the rear window. Just one last glance. Outside, Luis was running after the car, even as his face flushed and he gasped for breath. He gritted his teeth and didn't stop. My heart tightened. I turned to the driver and said, "Sir, drive faster. I'm in a hurry." "Luis, this time, it's my turn to leave you behind." Chapter 7. Studying abroad was long and exhausting. The unfamiliar environment, the language barrier, and the never-ending academic workload often left me gasping for air. Each day was a constant shuffle between my apartment and the classroom, nothing but a straight line from one point to the other. Sometimes I even stayed up all night working on research projects. Barely sleeping, this hectic pace, at least, helped me temporarily forget about Luis. I thought I'd never hear anything about him again, until one evening, a week after I'd arrived overseas, I received an international call. It was from Luis's mother. Since calling off the engagement, I hadn't had any contact with his parents. Back then, when I suddenly broke off the engagement, Luis's parents had strongly objected. They thought Luis must have done something to upset me and even came to my house, hoping to convince me to change my mind. But at that time, I was completely determined to sever ties with Luis. I hadn't even agreed to see them. They must have been heartbroken from that, because they never came by again. So when I saw it was Luis's mom calling, I was a bit surprised. "Diana! It's Auntie." Her voice trembled, choked with sobs. I had a bad feeling. Something must have happened to Luis. "What's wrong, Auntie? Please don't cry." I did my best to comfort her, unaware that my own heart was already tightening in my chest. Between sobs, she asked, "Diana, have you seen Luis? Did he go to find you?" That hopeful, desperate tone. I didn't have the heart to disappoint her. My voice caught in my throat. For a moment, I couldn't get a single word out. Sensing my hesitation, her crying grew louder and harder to hold back. "Diana, Luis has gone missing." I didn't catch anything after that. Her sobs drowned out every word. Then came Luis's father's voice in the background, sighing. "He's an adult. He'll be fine. Why did you call Diana about this?" And then, the call ended. The dial tone buzzed in my ear, and my heart skipped a beat. Luis is missing again? If, in his last life, he disappeared to escape me, then why this time? I set the phone down slowly, feeling something heavy sink in my chest. Must be because of her. Luis, he really loved her deeply, didn't he? Chapter 8. Luis gave up everything for that woman, and I, on the other hand, completed my degree in a foreign country. 3 years passed. When I returned to China, I was already one of the top psychology experts in the country. Besides conducting psychological evaluations for criminals, I also treated a few special patients. I never expected my life would intersect with Luis's again just a month after returning home. It was an ordinary afternoon when my student Bianca knocked on my office door. "Professor, there's a particularly difficult patient. I'm not sure how to handle it." She looked uneasy. I paused, set down my pen, and asked calmly, "What kind of patient?" "Take your time." Bianca sat down, visibly nervous. a repeat suicide case. He's from the military compound. His body is covered in self-inflicted wounds, slashes from a knife. His wrists, there are so many scars. Recalling the image, Bianca's face paled in horror. According to the police, he's jumped into a river, overdosed on pills, slashed his wrists, everything. He really wants to die. Her brows furrowed. She bit her lower lip. From her expression alone, I could already imagine how determined this patient must be. Bianca had seen a lot during her month with me. It had to be serious for her to look this troubled. I clipped the pen to the pocket of my white coat and stood. Let me take a look. Chapter 9. The hospital room reeked of disinfectant. The man lay on the bed, face pale as paper. Bandages were wrapped around his arms, legs, and wrists everywhere. His eyes were dull and lifeless, like two emotionless black holes. Two officers sat beside him, stiff and upright, watching him without blinking. When I arrived, they stood up. Doctor, thank goodness you're here. He's still ranting about wanting to die, blaming us for saving him. Their expressions were tight with worry. I nodded. Leave him to me. They exchanged a glance, then finally stepped out. I saw their visible relief as they left the room, as if a heavy pressure had lifted. And truthfully, the atmosphere in the room was suffocating, so silent you could hear a pin drop. I sat in the chair the officers had just vacated and looked gently at the man on the bed. People don't want to die for no reason. What's yours? I stared at the countless wounds on his body. Some were still bleeding through the gauze. He'd really gone deep. At the sound of my voice, he closed his eyes in despair, refusing to speak. I understand how you feel. I believe everyone has the right to decide their own life and death. They shouldn't have stopped you. I used the most fundamental technique of psychotherapy, positioning myself on the patient's side. And it worked. He finally stirred a little, lifting his eyelids. His dry, cracked lips parted slightly. If you understand, then let me die. His voice was raspy, full of despair and hopelessness. Rita is gone. What's the point of me staying alive? He said a name that struck a nerve. Rita. Rita? My heart clenched. I asked instinctively, Rita? His eyes flashed with surprise. You know her? I forced a smile, my gaze darkening. Know her? Rita was the woman Luis couldn't forget. The one he abandoned me for, on the day of our engagement. Chapter 10. I never imagined Luis could be this shameless. The woman he loved already had a fiancé. Stealing someone else's love, had Luis fallen so deep he couldn't control himself anymore? To have her. Was he really willing to carry such a disgraceful reputation? For the first time, I found Luis utterly disgusting, and at the same time, I felt a faint, pitiful sorrow for myself. How had I spent over 20 years never truly seeing his nature? Kevin, with tears streaming down his face, told me that Rita had died during a mission. He said he no longer wanted to live. At that moment, I felt such deep pity for Kevin, because my memories from my previous life told me the truth. Rita isn't dead. Right now, she's living it up with Luis in the northern province. She's already become his wife. They spend their days going in and out of high-end places, always arm in arm. Only Kevin is still foolish enough to think his fiancée died tragically. His eyes were bloodshot from crying. The saddest part, he said between sobs, is that I never even got to see Rita one last time. They said her body was never recovered. Kevin was crying so hard. He suddenly began tearing off the bandages on his body, madly. Blood seeped through the exposed skin underneath, and it stung my eyes just to look. Calm down. I tried to press down on him, but Kevin's strength was unexpectedly powerful. His voice shook violently, and the more he trembled, the faster the blood soaked through. We were about to get married. Why? Why did she suddenly leave me like this? Rita, my love, don't worry, I'll be with you soon. I'm coming. His pupils trembled. There was a disturbing light in his eyes, almost euphoric, like someone ready to embrace death. His pale lips even curled into a smile. My sleeve was drenched in blood. It was only then I realized. He had ripped off all his bandages. Doctor! Someone help! I shouted at the top of my lungs. The next second, doctors, nurses, and police officers rushed in like a wave. The crowd pushed me to the edge of the room. They were all busy trying to save Kevin. And me? I stood there, hands clenched tightly at my sides, teeth gritted without even realizing it. That hatred I thought I had long buried slowly began to resurface. How could they do this to someone who loved so deeply? If Rita saw Kevin like this, wouldn't her heart ache even a little? Maybe they never had a heart. Maybe they'd never feel pain. But does that mean they shouldn't be punished? Chapter 11. I spent the whole night thinking, and ultimately decided not to tell Kevin the truth. Everyone has their own fate. What I needed to do wasn't exposing Rita, but helping Kevin untangle his grief and let go of her. But that calm, rational decision lasted barely a day. Because the hospital called, Kevin, after being resuscitated the night before, had tried to hang himself in his hospital room just hours later. Thankfully, a nurse found him in time. He was rescued again. This time, however, Kevin had already slipped into a coma. There was barely a thread of breath left in him. When I rushed to the hospital, Bianca told me bluntly, "He's not going to make it." I pushed past her and burst into the room, grabbing Kevin's arm. "Kevin, hang in there. Rita's not dead. She lied to you." I couldn't do it. I couldn't help Rita lie to him. I couldn't watch him die while I stood by and did nothing. Kevin's tightly shut eyes twitched ever so slightly. It was like he really heard me. "Professor, that's amazing. Your method worked." Bianca thought I'd said that just to provoke a reaction. Her eyes were full of admiration, but I didn't respond. I simply stared at Kevin with clenched lips, refusing to blink. Moments later, he slowly opened his eyes. "Rita." The first thing he said was her name. My heart clenched, painfully. "Kevin, I'm sorry. I should have told you earlier. I know where Rita is. She's not dead. Not only is she alive, she's living quite well." Maybe only by seeing Rita in person could Kevin truly regain the will to live. More precisely, could he finally see Rita for who she really was? As soon as he heard my words, Kevin suddenly grabbed my sleeve with all his strength. "Are you serious? You're not lying to me?" Those dull, lifeless eyes lit up instantly, a glimmer of hope breaking through the darkness. I nodded solemnly. "I'm not lying. But first, you need to heal. Once you're stable, I'll take you to Heilongjiang to find her." Chapter 12. Kevin couldn't wait for his wounds to heal. As soon as he could walk, he insisted on going to Heilongjiang to find Rita, and I agreed. The sooner we went, the sooner he could face the truth and let go. On the train to Heilongjiang, I was wrapped in layers of thick clothes, practically bundled up like a rice dumpling. The winters there were brutal. Just thinking about them made me shiver involuntarily. Even my hands and feet ached with the memory of the cold. As the train drew closer, the windows gradually frosted over under the darkening sky. Then, Kevin suddenly turned to me and asked, "Doctor, how did you know Rita was in Heilongjiang?" He finally thought to ask, but I already had my answer prepared. "A friend of mine is there. He knows Rita." I was talking about Luis. I couldn't help but wonder, after 3 years, what kind of expression would Luis have when he saw me again? Chapter 13. Things went smoother than I ever expected. At the same upscale cafe from my past life, Kevin and I waited just 2 days before we saw Luis and Rita. But this time, someone else came with them, a man in a sleek suit with oiled back hair. Something felt off, as I was still wondering how this scene differed from what I remembered in my previous life. Kevin lost all control and charged toward Rita. "Rita!" He threw himself at her, wrapping his arms tightly around her. "You're alive! Rita, you're really alive. Why did you lie to me? Why?" He clung to her like a madman, refusing to let go. Rita's face turned bright red from shock. She pushed Kevin away with all her strength. Who are you? I don't know you." Her eyes welled up like a frightened deer, but the flicker of guilt in them gave her away. "Rita, what did you just say?" Kevin froze. He stared at her blankly, overwhelmed by heartbreak and disbelief. Rita immediately latched onto Luis's arm, her tone soft and pleading. "Luis, let's go, please." But Luis didn't move. He stood like a statue, eyes fixed in one direction. Rita followed his gaze. Only then did she realize he was looking at me. "Luis?" She shook his arm gently, Luis seemed to snap out of his trance. He nodded slowly, still dazed. What are you looking at? Let's go. Luis nodded again and tried to lead Rita away quickly, but I clearly saw it. He kept glancing back at me. I stood in the snowy street, facing Luis for the first time in 3 years, but in my eyes, he was colder than the wind this winter. Just as Luis, Rita, and the slick-haired man were about to leave, Kevin snapped. He yanked Rita away from Luis's arms and clutched her by the throat. Rita! Who is he? You betrayed me. You had your comrades fake your death and ran away with this man? Rita choked, unable to breathe, struggling desperately. She tried to calm Kevin down. Kevin, listen to me. Please leave for now. I'll explain everything later. Just go. She beat on Kevin's arms in panic, but Kevin's eyes were bloodshot. He couldn't hear a word. Then, in the bitter winter sunlight, a sudden glint of cold steel flashed before my eyes. The slick-haired man had pulled out a knife, aimed straight at Rita. Rita, watch out! We've been exposed! Chapter 14. I heard Luis shout. Then, without hesitation, the knife plunged straight into Rita's chest. When the blood sprayed out, Kevin froze. His eyes widened, almost popping out of their sockets. Rita! What's happening? Rita! He pressed his hands tightly over her wound, but it was too late. Rita had already collapsed into a pool of blood. Luis, meanwhile, instantly engaged the slick-haired man in a fierce fight. Get Rita out of here, now! He roared at Kevin, eyes bloodshot. But Kevin was already broken. His heart had died with Rita. He sat motionless in the snow, staring blankly at the glaring red beneath him. Eyes void, soul drained, only I. My heart rose to my throat. Following Luis, my mind went completely blank. What was going on? What did exposed mean? A sudden, explosive theory erupted in my brain. Luis and Rita weren't really husband and wife? Was that why he disappeared? Was it all part of an undercover mission, pretending to be a couple with Rita to take down enemy agents? That realization struck me like lightning. My knees buckled, and I collapsed into the snow. My heart clenched, so tight it felt like it would stop. Even my breath faltered. Had I misunderstood Luis this whole time? I didn't dare think further. Didn't dare. Tears gushed from my eyes like a flood, blurring my vision completely. Luis. I whispered his name, barely audible, and in that moment, I understood why I was reborn. It wasn't the heavens pitying me, giving me a second chance at life. It was justice for Luis. It was the universe giving me one last chance to learn the truth. Lying in the freezing snow, I clutched my chest tightly. It hurt like a blade was slicing through it. As Luis finally knocked the slick-haired man to the ground and ran toward me, I saw it. Behind him, the man pulled something dark from his coat and hurled it at Luis with all his strength. Luis! Behind you, watch out! Chapter 15. When the explosion went off, Luis shielded me with his entire body. The thick stench of blood mixed with burnt flesh rushed into my nose. I was terrified. I was heartbroken. I trembled uncontrollably. Luis, are you okay? I cradled his face, checking again and again. My tears overflowed, freezing into icy crystals under the snowy sky. Luis's face was ghostly pale, yet he still forced a faint smile, and gently wiped away the tears from my cheeks. Diana, I'm so glad I got to see you again. My Diana came back. That's good. That's really good. The more he spoke, the paler his lips turned. His eyelids grew heavier, lower, until, Luis, wake up! I shook him hard, but he slowly closed his eyes, and at the very last second, he was still smiling. I struggled out from under his body, turned him over, and when I saw his back, my heart nearly stopped. One of his legs was gone, blown right off. The scene was utter chaos, blackened debris everywhere. Oh God, what have I done? My mind went blank. For the first time in my life, I thought I deserved to die. If it weren't for me, Rita wouldn't be dead. Luis wouldn't have lost his leg. I collapsed into the snow. Darkness fell over me, and I passed out completely. Chapter 16. The enemy agents were successfully eliminated. But Luis was now permanently disabled. He would never return to active duty again. Rita died in the line of duty. The next day, Kevin followed her. And me? I survived. Pathetically. When Luis came to see me in his wheelchair, it was right after my second suicide attempt with sleeping pills. He looked at my pale face, and tears suddenly streamed down his cheeks. Diana, do you hate me that much? Would rather die than look at me again? Luis still believed I tried to kill myself because I didn't want to see him. I closed my eyes, but I couldn't stop the tears from escaping. Luis. Do you know Kevin was my? Before I could finish, Luis cut me off violently. It wasn't your fault. It was all just coincidence. His voice was strained, neck muscles bulging, veins popping on his forehead. It suddenly reminded me of when we were kids. Every time I messed up, even if Luis knew it was my fault, he'd always defend me anyway. He always did that. The kids in the compound used to tease him for it, said he was way too biased, called him a little husband in training. That memory flooded in. Then I looked at the empty right leg of his pants, and my tears mixed with the blood on my lap. I had cried so much the past few days, my eyes were nearly blind from it. When Luis saw the blood, he panicked more than I did. Diana! Doctor! Someone help! Diana's bleeding. He spun his wheelchair so fast, shouting through the ward like mad, until the doctors rushed in and surrounded me. Only then did he finally calm down. Chapter 17. In the end, I didn't die, because Luis, dragging his disabled right leg, watched over me like a hawk. He didn't even blink. Just like the officers who once guarded Kevin, every bite of food I ate, every sip of water I drank, had to go through him first. A man with a missing leg spent every day trying to cheer up someone whole like me. If he wasn't telling me silly jokes, he was taking me outside to get some fresh air. Other people might ride bicycles with their girlfriends. Luis? He took me out on wheelchair races. He said he had mastered the art of wheelchair maneuvering and wanted to race me, a healthy person, to see who's faster. And when I saw him spinning around in his wheelchair, under the breeze, in the sunlight, with that radiant smile on his face, I couldn't help but think, how can someone be so endlessly optimistic, even without a right leg? He was still as free as a bird. Then one day, he struggled to rise from the wheelchair, and with only his left leg, knelt before me and solemnly proposed, Diana, will you marry me again? He said. After becoming disabled, I still chose to live happily because you came back. He said, Diana, would you be my right leg for the rest of my life? And then, I'm sorry. I'll probably burden you for the rest of our lives. But I was already a mess of tears. I threw my arms around him, crying so hard I couldn't speak. All the words stuck in my throat. And in the end, all I could do was nod over and over again. Yes, I do. Yes, if I could, I would say it 10,000 times. Luis, I do.